limitations they might have?
Yeah, I think, in today's world, you have to be a good 200-foot player. I really believe that. It's you got to be. Everybody can back check. I always say everybody can play a defense. Everybody can work hard. Those are buy-in things for me. Not everybody can make that backdoor saucer pass, but everybody can do the foundation of the game and perform at a high level. And that's kind of the kids we're looking for. I think a lot of times, everybody coming into a junior program or a pro program coming from the level below, you tend to be the guy that gets a tap on the shoulder when all those important situations come about. But there's not enough ice for everybody. You got to buy your time. You got to earn it a little bit, and I think it's an excellent opportunity to round out your game to be a more complete player.
That was longtime pro and current general manager of the Brandon Wheat Kings, Mr. Marty Murray, and you are listening to the Up My Hockey Podcast with Jason Podolin. Just watch me now. Welcome to Up My Hockey with Jason Podolin, where we deconstruct the NHL journey, discuss what it takes to make it, and have a few laughs along the way. I'm your host, Jason Podolin, a 31st overall draft pick who played 41 NHL games, but thought he was destined for 1,000. Learn from my story and those of my guests. This is a hockey podcast about reaching your potential. Hey there, welcome back to the Up My Hockey Podcast with Jason Podolin. I am Jason Podolin, your host, and you are here for episode number 90. And today we have on none other than Marty Murray. Marty Murray was a junior phenom in the WHL back in the early 90s for the Brandon Wheat Kings. As we talk about in the discussion, he was what was called a 3-spot prospect. So before the days of the Bantam draft, you were able to put a player on your protected list, if you were a WHL team, the day he turned 13 years old. But when he turned 13 years old, that spot was worth 3 players on your list. So you had a 50-player protected list. That included all the players on your current team, and most teams would carry over 20 players. So then that meant that you would have around 30 spots or so, a little less, 25 usually, of prospects. So for a team to take a 13-year-old, it was quite rare because it ate into your prospect list. But Marty was one of those players. He was traded in the the Trevor Kidd deal, which brought a Memorial Cup to Spokane, and he went on to be the absolute, centerpiece of that Brandon organization for the next 4 years. He was a 4th-round pick to the Calgary Flames, and went on to play 261 NHL games with 4 different teams. He played with Calgary. He played with the Philadelphia Flyers. He played with the Carolina Hurricanes and also with the LA Kings. He went overseas. He played in Austria. He played in Switzerland. He played in Germany. He played in the AHL and the minors quite extensively. He played in a lot of places. And one thing about Marty was anywhere he went, he produced. He was essentially a point-a-game plus guy everywhere. I guess except the NHL. The NHL, he had 2 real good seasons, though, in the roles in the ice time that he was allotted. He had 12 goals and 11 goals with the Flyers in 70 games and almost 30 points in both of those seasons. So quite accomplished in and of himself at that level as well. And as I say in the interview, and I say at the end, Marty just was one of these guys that he was easy to be around. He was a good human being, and his teammates loved him. And that's true everywhere he went. You will have a hard time finding somebody, if you could find somebody, that has something bad to say about Marty Murray. And that's the thing with these players that play as long as Marty did, who played for as many teams as he did, and now is back in hockey as a coach for a while, as a GM as a while in the States, and now as a GM in the WHL, is a testament to his character and what type of person he is. Smart hockey man. He was an incredible hockey player, like super smart. I say early on in the interview here that one of the worst parts about that trade for me personally was that I lost the opportunity to play for him because, like I said, he was a 3-spot prospect, as was I for Spokane, and I think Spokane had ideas of him and I playing together for 2 or 3 years, and that would have been a heck of a lot of fun because boy did he see the ice and boy did he love to pass. and I was somebody who loved to shoot. So I think we would have worked out pretty well together. But yeah, Marty, we talk about a lot of good stuff here. We talk about his role as a GM now, what he's up to, how he's building that organization. We talk a lot about his own personal journey on this call. Marty had a lot of ups and downs, like I said, from the minors to the NHL, making an NHL team as in his rookie year, being sent down, performing well and not really getting a chance, making a huge decision to move overseas early in his career, to come back and then to have the NHL career and to get the one-way contract that he had always dreamed of. So we cover a lot of his story. We cover a lot of his, some of his challenges and some of his celebrations, and I think this is going to be a conversation that you really enjoy. I know it's one that I enjoyed, and yeah, with when somebody plays in as many places as he did, it was as successful as he did, there's obviously a lot of lessons there. So I look forward to following Marty as the new GM of the Brandon Wheat Kings. I know he's worn that hat before in different leagues, and it'll be great for him to get back to his WHL roots and add to that. The tradition there of what the weekends have brought for a long time, and you are going to be blessed with his insight here for the next hour and 20 minutes. So thanks again for being here. I really appreciate all of you who are choosing to listen. We're getting back into a pretty good habit here of adding a podcast, a new episode out every week. I'm going to try and continue to do that here until the Christmas break, so we can get you in some good listening habits and keep producing some good content. So thanks again for choosing to download Up My Hockey. I know there's a lot of choices out there, and let's get you to the interview with Marty Murray. All right, here we are for episode 90. Got an old, well, I was going to say teammate, but we actually never did play together. We just went to junior camps together with Spokane. But Marty Murray is on the program. Welcome to the program, Mr. Murray.
Thanks for having me, Bob. It's a pleasure to be here.
No problem. That's actually interesting because I just clued into that, ironically, that we never played together. So maybe that's where we should start.
Yeah.
With you being a Spokane Chief and, what you thought was going to be a future Spokane Chief, and I was going to be a Spokane Chief, and we were both on the protected list, and I'll have that be your lead-in. What happens next?
Yeah, no, I was pretty excited about Spokane. I think that you obviously got a taste of it firsthand playing there, but for me, being on the list and going out and meeting the Brett family and Brian Maxwell was coach at the time, and a lot of excitement with the organization with Pat Falloon and Ray Whitney and all those guys around there. And, I thought I was going to be a Spokane Chief. And, I was a 15-year-old playing AAA midget in Manitoba, and my rights were traded to the Brandon Wheat Kings. I was involved in the Trevor Kidd trade. So I think a trade that worked out for both sides. Kidder went there and helped Spokane win a Memorial Cup, and I was able to get back to my home province and play for 4 years with the Wheat Kings. So it was quite a wild ride, but I did think at one time there was no doubt I was going to be a Spokane Chief and play with you.
Like a huge blockbuster at the time. I mean, like as far as trades go, that was you were a three-player list too, correct?
I think we were the last. Our 75 birth year was the last year of the listed players, and I think the 76 was the first year of the Bantam draft. So yeah, I think I was a 3-year list guy, or a 3-man, 3-spotter, I guess they called it back in the day.
At 13.
Yeah, at 13, I think I was listed, and I know Kelly and Spelty there were good buddies, and I think it was an opportunity for both sides. Brandon was kind of in a rebuilding stage, and Spokane had the opportunity to make a real run at it with some of the horses they had there. So I think it worked out pretty good for both sides.
Yeah, I mean that was wild, and actually, I mean you're almost 100% right, but just because I was the 76th birth year, like 1 year following you, or no, 2 years. Are you 74 or 75? It's 75. Yeah, so 1 year behind you. I was also listed at 13, and then when they did switch to the Bantam draft, there was 3 of us. So the first year of 75, there's actually quite a few guys at that point because they had a couple of years to list players, right? So quite a bit of that draft had already been spoken for. And then in my WHL draft year, there was myself, Travis Clayton, and Jeff Friesen that were 13-year-olds listed. So
Yeah, that would make
like
sense.
the next year. So the 77 draft was the first full draft that everyone was eligible for.
Yeah,
So,
that makes sense.
So yeah,
That
so
makes
you and I
sense.
were both 3 spotters, which is interesting. And maybe even we'll wind up behind there, because I know some of my audience here is as hockey parents, and they're coming up through the ranks, and they have maybe Pee-wees or Adams kind of there. Were you, I assume, and I guess it's fairly obvious, being a list at 13, that you were racking it up pretty good there as a minor hockey league player. Were you always one of the best, or the best in your team, or you're even in your province for that matter?
I think I was a typical, I guess a player that would be listed as a 3-spotter. I think I had quite a bit of success. I grew up in small town Manitoba, so I'm sure it was a little harder for scouts in our area to gauge kids where they're at. It was kind of hit or miss who you're playing against. So I'm sure now that I have my scouting GM hat on, it's one of the things you always ask yourself is what's competition like. So I think that would probably be fair to say in my world where I grew up in is sometimes you play a game where very competitive, and sometimes it would be probably 15-2. So that was probably a little bit of a challenge, but I was thankful I grew up where I did. It's like in my hometown had 28 people in it, and I was always able to play with my own age group and then the age group above, and then ultimately I got to play AAA midget when I was a first-year bantam. So I thought that was a real crucial step in my development. And back then, sometimes things like that happen, and it's obviously changed quite a bit. And but I'm glad I grew up in the area I did, and had a lot of great memories. So.
Yeah, that's actually your response there brings up a few questions, and we'll get to the competition factor later. Maybe when we get into more of your GM duties and stuff, which I find interesting. Myself as a hockey dad, growing up now with young kids who are aspiring players, whether it be junior A or major junior. But going back, I couldn't help but think of Craig Geeky and Morgan Geeky and Connor Geeky, right? Like from small town Manitoba, and growing up in the minor hockey system. And like I've actually had Craig on as a guest inside my parent group, and just his philosophy and like keeping close to home, and not that that's the way, or it has to be the way. There's no one way, but it's just so nice to hear those stories now in this day and age, when parents are sending their kids away early and to these hockey factories and academies, and that Craig was able to say, hey, we're okay right here. We're going to keep them close to home. I'm going to get them on the ice, play in a small town, and obviously huge success for that family. So, I mean, it sounds like that was kind of what your upbringing was like.
Yeah, for sure. And it was, as it was so much different back then. The academies weren't, they didn't come into fruition yet. And kids just played in their own hometown until it was time to move away and play junior. And like I said, at that time for me, I was fortunate. I was able to move up and usually play on 2 teams in my hometown. So I was playing against older kids, which I think helps, a person mature. And then, like I said, I got to skip bantam and move right into AAA midget. So I think that really helped my development. And, a guy like Geek is a perfect example in today's world, raising the family he did. And, I know that hockey's almost come a year-round sport, but, he's an example there, that family that they played a lot of baseball in the summer, and they're just true athletes, right? So a little bit of an old school approach, but, it's proof in the pudding that still works.
And that it still works, right? It still works.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Really, really cool story. I like. I was just thinking about the academies. Like the only academy that existed back in the day wasn't called an academy; it was Notre Dame.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah,
that was essentially the only one, and they actually had a few hockey powerhouses there, a few wagons that came through there. I actually went and visited that property. I don't know if you did, and I was there. When was I? 13 or 14, I think. My dad said, "Well, if you want to go, I'll take you." And so we went out there, and I did the visit, and I was like, oh, I don't think this is for me.
It's interesting. It's just, you probably fit the town in, a couple of rinks. It's small, but it's hockey 24/7. And yeah, you look back on, a lot of the players that went there. I mean, it's quite impressive. And they're obviously the pioneers with, with the academy type, even though it wasn't an academy at the time. But a lot of really good players have gone through there.
The whole concept was really, I mean, it seemed like their origin. You mentioned like the exposure and you being from small town Manitoba, the fact that the Chiefs found you. I mean, again, in our day and age, right? Because the scouting network was not as extensive as it is now. And a lot of times, regionality definitely played a part in who teams got. So the fact that Spokane heard of you or found you or had connections there, it obviously speaks to how well you were playing. And I actually had a conversation the other day. I was mentioned that you were coming on, and it made me reminisce because you said it did work out really well for both teams, like from an organizational standpoint. But I'm like, I think the one guy who got robbed was me, because I would have loved to have played some hockey with you. My goodness,
I'm sure
you were such an amazing playmaker, and your vision, and boy, it would have been fun to play with you for 3 years. That would have been
no, I would have
fantastic.
enjoyed that too, for sure.
Yeah, let's talk about your time in Brandon, though. I mean, you are a major junior hockey graduate. Went the pro route. From there, I'll call you undersized. Maybe, I don't know what the right word is. How tall are you? I know it says 5'9". Maybe you are 5'9". Is that your height?
I'm 5'9", maybe a hair under, but yeah, 5'9".
Okay. So 5'9", playing back in the early 90s. Obviously, it was a big person's game, big, heavy players out there. And you were on the smaller side, but obviously made up for it with your skill set and your head. Like, what was that like playing major junior? You already mentioned you had the experience of being a double underage playing midget. So, I mean, you had that experience of not getting killed in that league. Did that help you moving into major junior?
It did, but it's still a huge transition, right? I mean, you lived it 2 years, 16, and all of a sudden you're going from playing against kids to 19-year-old men that are first-round NHL picks. So it was definitely an eye-opener. It wasn't easy. Like you said, I was a little undersized. I think my first year I came in at about 163 pounds, and I was lucky. I got to play quite a bit, especially the second half of the year. I think I weighed out at the end of the year about 148. So I was pretty small, and so you had to learn to avoid the bigger boys. But it was certainly an eye opener. It wasn't easy. I think you and I probably both highly touted prospects coming out of their respective programs into the junior hockey world, and it was hard. I mean, I remember as a 16-year-old, I had 4 goals at Christmas, and came home in tears on a few occasions. It was hard, right? And ultimately, looking back on it, I think it made me a stronger person, and made me understand what it takes to have success. And coming from midget or peewee before that, everything came relatively easy, right? And first time faced a little adversity, and I think it helped me become a better player in the long run, for sure.
Yeah, that's one thing with what I do now, with helping players with whatever it is that's helping them, whether it's just to get better or getting them through a downtime or a valley. The adversity is often like the shining light looking back on the career, right? Like, if you do get through it, if you manage to, like, weather the storm and get through it, you usually come out on the other side a stronger, more experienced player, right? So your story there, 4 goals at Christmas. I had Jerome Aguinalon, a product of the powerhouse Kamloops Blazers organization. And obviously, we all know the career Jerome had, a future Hall of Famer. He couldn't get into hockey games, right? He couldn't get into hockey games. And when he did, he said he wouldn't play until the second or third period, depending on the score. So, but yet looking back, he says, as hard as that was for him, he is so thankful that he was there and in that environment, and with that exposure to that team. Sounds like maybe you didn't have a hard time getting in the lineup, but you were having a hard time with your production. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I started out as on in exhibition. I think I played in the first or second line. I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun. This is going to be easy. Then all of a sudden, the trickle down from the NHL camp comes back, right? So I got pushed down to the fourth line and had to earn my stripes. And my first year in Brandon was a real challenging one for our team. We won 11 games that year. Certainly in a big rebuilding time for the Brandon Wheat Kings, and Kelly McCrimmon was at the helm there, and Kelly throughout the season decided to really have a change of the guard. We traded away a lot of our older players and went with youth in the second half. So I was unfortunately, we weren't winning very many hockey games, but at the same time, for a personal development standpoint, it allowed me to get quite a few minutes nightly in the Western Hockey League in the second half of the year. And I think that really helped kind of speed up the development process for me.
Yeah. So I see on your on your rap sheet here, 20 goals as a 16-year-old. So that obviously 75% of those or so came after the Christmas break. What was the message, or was there a message, whether it was an internal one you said to yourself or from your family or your support network? Like, how do you, we talk about getting through it, right? And the adversity was there and we have the tears, but a lot of times we miss that part of the story of like, well, what happened?
Mm-hmm.
How did you get through it? Do you remember any terminal point in that scenario that helped you make it through?
Yeah, I do. I think for me, I went away at Christmas to play for some Team Canada stuff with Team Western. And, you go back to, you're playing with your peers again, kids the same age, a lot of 16-year-olds, coming out. And for me, I think that allowed me to kind of get my confidence back. And I remember I played in that tournament over Christmas, and I came back and I scored the first goal after Christmas. And to me, that was just kind of a weight off the shoulders, and everything, got a little easier after that. And obviously, playing a little more, we kind of had the change of the guard where we went with the youth movement in the second half of my rookie season. So, played in a line with Bobby House, who came over in the Trevor Kidd trade as well. Hauser had an absolute rocket, and, I was a passer, so we had some good chemistry there. Mike Manilek was our other winger, and we just developed some chemistry there where we played together every night for the second half of the season, and, played power play. It was certainly trying, but we got that experience, and I think, definitely paved the way for all three of us.
That's fantastic. Just going to take a short break from the conversation with Marty Murray to talk to you about mental agility and talk to you about growth mindset. These are two key factors in overcoming adversity, what many would see as a big valley, what many would see as a confidence-reducing event. And for Marty, we just heard there was such an event in his career, and that was when he was 16 years old, playing for the Wheat Kings, and he had 4 goals at Christmas. He'd never experienced that little production before in his life. He didn't know how to handle it. He came home with tears, and when I asked, how did you get through it, he said that he was able to play amongst his peers, age appropriate peers, in a Western kind of regional tournament, and he experienced lots of success, and he came back with more confidence, which is fantastic. But it sounded like that was circumstantial. There was an opportunity there that allowed him to gain confidence in a different way. Now, what happens if that opportunity for Marty didn't exist? Well, what happens if he just went home for Christmas and came back under the same circumstances without the confidence boost that he had from the regional tournament? And that's the thing that I don't want athletes to have to wait for. Hopefully something good to happen to them. So when I talk about such things as mental agility and about growth mindset in the Peak Potential Hockey Project, my 4-week signature program for hockey players to develop the mindset required to capture audacious goals and dreams, I give them that skill. I give them the skill to see challenge as an opportunity. I give them the skill to pivot their thoughts so they can change the meaning of the story, to keep confidence high, to give a new meaning to what's happening around them, and to also thrive, not get into these slumps. So if that is something that you think your athlete needs either now or will need in the future, and I will tell you, if they're going to play hockey for any length of time, they will need the skill of mental agility. They will need to understand the difference between a fixed and growth mindset and be able to self-assess where they are with either one of those mindsets and be able to apply it to their own situation. These are skills that they can learn, and many of these athletes don't have them. So don't wait for something bad to happen and then see if they have the ability to figure it out, or wait for have an opportunity that gets put in front of them that helps them out. Why not give them the tools now so they are ready in the moment? So that is what the Peak Potential Hockey Project is all about. Well, that's part of it, actually. The mental agility portion is week 1. Week 3 is all about growth mindset. We also get into goal setting 2.0, which I call 10x development. And we also get into extreme ownership, which is controlling the controllables, and giving players, empowering players to take control of their hockey journey and be able to handle maybe rough situations, and be able to make the most out of the opportunities in front of them. So if that sounds something that's interesting for you, go to www.upmyhockey.com. Under services, you will find the Peak Potential Hockey Project. If you're listening to this live or on the release date, there is a new project, a new guided mission that has 4 coaching calls with me included, starting on October the 10th. October the 10th or October the 11th. If you're listening to this at a different time, you can just go to the website and you'll see it's about a 5-week rolling cycle that I offer the guided mission. You can get involved in a future mission, and I would love to support your athlete. Now let's get back to the conversation with Marty Murray. Yeah, I kind of remember a bit of a similar story. I mean, I was a third liner for the most part, usually not fourth line in my 16-year-old year, and was having success, I guess, but not like big success. And then Scott Townsend broke his jaw with like 20 games left in the season, and I got moved up a slot. So I moved up a slot to the second line, got to play power play, and of course you need opportunity, but also just caught fire, right? Stuff was just going in, and I had 19 in my last 15 games as a 16-year-old to finish with 36. So, the opportunity does mean something for sure, right? You have to be in those spots to put the numbers up. But I was still learning the game on the third line. You're still learning how to interact socially. Speaking of which, like, we come from the dark ages a little bit. Was that a big transition for you as a 16-year-old, and just the way the league was run and with the rookie stuff going on? Do you have any issues with that type of an adjustment?
For me, I think the biggest transition is to move away from home, right? For the first time, you're 15. For me, billets are such an important piece of a junior hockey career. I was fortunate to live with family friends in Brandon and for 4 years, and it was literally like a second family to me. They're still in Brandon, and great to visit with them when I get back here. But the fact that my parents were only an hour and 45 minutes away, I think they missed probably 3 or 4 games in 4 years, and so just being able to see friends and family on a regular basis and have comfort in my billet home, I think that really went a long way for me, and I'm very thankful for the opportunity they provided me.
Yeah, the billets are huge. I couldn't agree more. I got blessed with an amazing family that had been doing it for years, and had seen a lot of players come through, and they were actually, when it now as the general manager, like, those are the families that every family, every team has some really good ones, and it's almost like the bell curve, right? And they were definitely rock solid, and they were looking to get out of the game. And I came up that 1 year as, like, I guess as a 15-year-old after I turned 16, and came for the playoffs. So they asked if I could come with them, probably knowing full well that they're gonna create a relationship and a bond with me, and they decided to stick around, and they had me for 4 years after that. So I talk to Dick and Sue still from time to time, and like you said, massively impactful scenario, and it can really make or break a junior career if you're in the wrong spot. I know it's something that you guys look at very carefully when you're picking who gets to do that.
Absolutely. And on top of that, I think that kind of a funny story, it goes full circle for me, is that my little billet brother now heads the marketing department and brand department for the Brandon Wheat Kings. So I do see him on a regular basis here in the offices and stuff. So it's kind of funny how it's come full circle from, playing knee hockey with him in the basement as a 10-year-old and me being 17 or 18 to now kind of working together. So it's kind of fun to see some familiar faces on a daily basis.
Oh, that is wild. That's super cool. And just getting back to the rookie aspect of things, like, I think what I see now with the junior teams that I work with, and even at the pro level, like, there's much less segregation, and there's almost zero, whatever you would call it, hazing, I guess. And I think, that's the culture, obviously, that people are now recognizing as a high performance culture, right? That you can't feel like you're on the outside trying to get in. There are different ways that you can earn your experience and earn your stripes, other than ostracizing somebody or making them feel uncomfortable, right? And so, yeah, that's one of the things that I think is hockey culture has been taking a bit of a bash in certain circles lately, but I think that's a massive, that's a bright spot, I think, of what I see in the game right now.
Yeah. So too, and I was fortunate in my years in Brandon, and where they were good people and I was treated well, and obviously you have your rookie duties and things like that where you're carrying the stick bags, and kind of earning your stripes that way. But I was treated very well by the older players here, and you kind of want to continue to do that as you get older. You want to pay it forward, and obviously you can have some good laughs and things like that. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're a family, and you want everybody to feel comfortable coming to the rink every day. And like I said, I think there's some responsibilities that the young players have where they earn their stripes, but obviously within reason. And I was lucky to be part of that culture here in Brandon, and something I want to continue on now, being on this side of the chair, as we do things right, and everybody's family.
Yeah, super important. Like, I remember you said, like, I was the same way. Like, I remember Paxton Schulte was one of the older guys when I was there. Like, just like he taught me how to tie my first tie, and like told me took me under his wing. Jared Bednar, who I've had on the podcast, he was one of the older guys and would be the first guy to invite me to the poker game or whatever. It's just like a lot of good guys, good humans, and I think that does speak. It goes through the organization too, right? Because now when I'm an old guy at 17 or 18 or 19, whatever, right? Like you treat people the right way. And I think that doesn't happen by accident. And usually, if you've had that bad experience, sometimes that does jade you, right? And you feel like that's the norm. So I think we were both grateful to be where we were at. And it was super cool for you because, you guys had a quick turnaround there in Brandon, like being from bottom of the league to one of the top contenders. What was one of your most memorable moments from your time there?
Boy, the first year, like I said, we won 11 games in my 16-year-old year, and I think we set a CHL record at the time to go from 11 wins to 43 or something like that. So we had a real nice turnaround there in year two. And I don't know. I mean, there's so many great memories. Obviously, I think that my last year we won the Eastern Division and met Kamloops in the league final. Kamloops was hosting the Memorial Cup that year. They beat us in 6 in the league final, but we still got to go to the Memorial Cup because they were the host team. So getting an opportunity to play in a Memorial Cup, I think that outside of winning a Stanley Cup growing up in the prairies, I think, you want to talk about the opportunity to win a Memorial Cup. So we came up short. Certainly a week I'd probably like to have back when you're reflecting everything. But, a lot of that core group, we went through some turbulence together, but ended up pretty good, in the third, fourth year of our junior career. So ultimately making the Memorial Cup was a huge feat. Came up a little short, but good times. But I still think it's the people you meet along the way, right? And you'll remember winning a game in PA on a cold winter night, but it's those relationships you build throughout your career, not only as a junior hockey player but as a pro player. As you get older, I think you recognize the value in that is the people you meet along the way. And here you and I are 30 years later where we first met, and this is what it's all about.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. Actually, I had Eric Goddard on as my last guest, and it was he's got back into the game again after a hiatus of however many years since he retired, and now he's scouting for the Minnesota Wild, and you could just see the smile on his face when he started talking about the team that he was involved in again. That he hadn't experienced that, and it kind of brought him back home to this game that was home for him. And then I reflected on the fact of just this podcast, like how I get amped up every time, because for the most part, I have on people that I either played with or had some acquaintance to, right? And to reconnect and to establish those old relationships or reestablish them is super awesome. Like, and that's one of the best things, like you said, about it is catching up with guys, and that it's like you never left, right? And it's awesome that the hockey world is like that, because it's so full of good people. And anyways, and I couldn't be more appreciative of you taking the time to come out.
No, it's interesting too.
Marty, that year, you said you came close and almost fell short. Did you get to the final that year in the Memorial Cup?
We lost in the semifinals to Detroit at the time, the OHL champion, and then Kamloops won in the final. So we were close, and it was a grind that week for sure. And I look back on that was my last year of junior hockey, and I wish I could have had the Memorial Cup back. I didn't probably play the best hockey that I wanted to. I remember that year of, the World Juniors and, playing over 100 games that season. I was absolutely exhausted. But if I could give anything back, looking over my pro career and junior career would be go back and play the Memorial Cup again. I would like to have another crack at it. But obviously, you look up and down the roster of the Kamloops Blazers; they're pretty deep there and a pretty good team. So it was a fun ride for sure.
That is nuts to revisit that squad because obviously when you win the Memorial Cup, you're a good team. Everyone knows that. You get to the finals, you get there, you're a good team. But like they legitimately had 8 to 10 NHLers, like future NHLers on that team,
and really good ones too. The Darcy Tucker was a really good junior hockey player, and Nat Don McKelly, and obviously Iggy and Shane Doan, and
Doan
Jason
again,
Strudwick and
Lukowicz,
and
Jason Holland,
Nolan
Baumgartner.
The list goes. Those are the guys who had some real solid NHL careers, you look back on that lineup for sure, and there's certainly a lot of really good players and good people. And what's neat about their organization too, it's not like they just went out and traded for everybody. I think their team was primarily built from the ground up, and they obviously, I think they won 3 Memorial Cups during my era in junior hockey there. So obviously a dynasty, and a lot of really good players went through that program.
Yeah,
as well.
Was that I get his name? Was it Bob Brown? That was
Bob Brown, I think. Yeah, Rob's dad, I think, kind of orchestrated that. And to win 1 Memorial Cup, I think any junior team would, but I think they won 3. Ryan Huska and those guys, I think, won 3 Memorial Cups. So that I don't know if that's something that'll ever be broken.
Yeah, that's crazy. And just on your coattails, so after you left and went pro, maybe you remember, maybe you don't. I know once I went pro, it was tough to keep track of what was going on. The world was a little different, but we ended up playing Brandon in the finals again, and Brandon beat us in the finals to go to the Memorial Cup, and that's the one thing. Obviously it's a great run to win the West and to get to the final, and we had a solid team, and it was personally one of my. It was actually the pinnacle of my career. Like I was playing my best hockey ever in the playoffs there, but just couldn't get it through. Brandon, that's one thing I wish I was able to do, was get to go to a Memorial Cup. But anyways,
it's so hard. Memorial Cup aside, it's so hard to come out of your conference in the Western Hockey League and ultimately the league. You're beat to shreds. Most of the series went 7 games, 6 or 7 games, and it's a boxing match for sure, and you're beat up pretty good. By the time the Memorial Cup rolled around, I think everybody's kind of feeling the bumps and bruises and the fatigue a little bit. But it's they always say it's the hardest trophy in hockey to win, and it's hard to argue that.
Yeah. Well, think about the travel between that series, whether you're doing Kamloops or Spokane, right? Brandon.
Did you guys pass to Brandon, or did you guys actually fly?
I was just thinking that while I was saying that, and I think we might have split a plane. I think the two teams might have split a plane. I think that's what we did. But it brought me back to that road trip, because for us, we would always go. I think we'd go to the East twice a year, maybe once, and we would end for whatever reason in Brandon, and then we would come home after that game. 26 hours or whatever. Yeah. We'd usually stop in Medicine Hat for breakfast and then continue on. Talk about a grind, right? And that's the thing between the WHL and the OHL. It's such a huge difference. It's just how many hours you're on the bus.
Yeah, that takes a toll on you for sure. We did the exact same thing. We think we always finished our road trip up in Portland. The same thing. We stopped in Medicine Hat for a shower and a bite to eat, and that was the only stop on the way home. But those are fun times too. Those obviously pre-cell phones and tablets and stuff like that. So we had nothing to do but play cards or watch Slapshot probably 50 times on the throughout a hockey season. So but ultimately that's how you get to know your teammates, and like I said, you build those relationships that last forever.
I think that's a hot topic, and I know that the world is different. For me in our house, it's a hot topic. For the players that I work with on a private and a group level, it's a topic. But it's the devices, right? And where their place is, whether personally, or whether it's in a group, or whether it's at dinner, or whether it's on the bus or in the dressing room, and dinosaurs like you and I, what you just talked about is exactly what I remember. I remember some games for sure, but it's the bus trips, and it's the card games, and it's the jokes, and it's the laughs, and it's the sitting beside your buddy, and really getting to know each other on a human level. And I just kind of cry inside when I see these guys like this all the time, the time. It's really all the time, it seems like to me. And I just think they're missing a big part of it. Do you have any dogs in that fight? Do you try and handle that from an organizational level as a GM, or what do you do?
The season's so young, we haven't like really, nailed it down yet. But I think for us, like in my past junior experience in this era, we always had rules in place, like no cell phones, especially in the locker room, right? And some guys, I get it, they their phone runs their music through their headphones and stuff like that, so I get it. But we just said, hey guys, just be respectful, like don't be on your phone texting people or Snapchatting or whatever. If it becomes a problem, then we'll address it. And, I'm fortunate where even our leadership group last year, they put out a little pouch outside the locker room where guys would put their cell phone in prior to entering. So you're never going to battle that, giant. But I think if you can control it, do some things like that, where when they're at the rink, like let's put them away and get to know each other a little better and think about what our task is at hand.
Yeah. It's one of those tough ones. It's just like, it's like you don't know what you don't know, right? And they have never experienced a world without them, so they don't really know what they're missing. And it almost sounds, it's like grandpa telling you, back when I was a kid, and so it doesn't really work. But it is amazing when you do put it away. And I know that as an adult now, right? Like we work from our phones. Like there's a necessity to the device that is relevant and real, but it's also a massive distraction from the connection.
Like, absolutely, and it's kind of
right?
A blessing and a curse, being on this side of it. It allows you the flexibility to do your job from a boat in the summer, essentially, but you can never get away from it either, right? And I don't know how they did it back in the day where, it was fax machines and landlines. I'm sure it was more challenging and required you to sit in an office most of the day. But obviously, all that's changed now, and like I said, there's some things that aren't so good about it, and things that are great about it. And for me, sitting in a GM's chair, it allows me to, maybe spend an afternoon with the family at home rather than sitting in an office all day. Where you can do your work and feel connected, but at the same time, you never get away from it. But that's the world we're living in, and we're rolling with it.
Yeah, well, totally. So, I mean, I'm talking to guys at the NHL levels, and I'm sure you do, and some of the coaches that I talk to, it is like they think it's even a challenge at that level. Like, on the road, I'm sure I love going on the road because we all go out for dinner together. Like, what restaurant are we going to, right? Like, sitting there, hanging out, having a. He's like, I shouldn't say he. But the people that I'm talking to, like a lot of times, like it's just room service now at hotels. And guys will bring their PlayStation, like NHL level guys, and that's just what the road trip looks like now. So it kind of, it breaks my heart in a way, because all those things, like I think we're really part of team building and a part of these networks that, that you and I are talking about. But it is what it is. And I think they got to find a healthy way to create that culture and create that connection within the device-oriented world. But I think not having it be part of the discussion is a mistake, because it can become totally too far one direction.
Absolutely. I think it's the guards change, right? Like probably back in our area, you're worried about kids missing curfew and being out in the town and stuff like that, where nowadays honestly, I call for curfew, and a lot of times kids are in bed already. They're pretty dialed in, but in saying that, you're worried about them being up on their phones till 3 a.m. or playing video games all night. That's kind of the modern day missing curfew, right? Where they're not out of the town causing trouble, they're just not sleeping and getting rest. And as we both know, if you're not sharp mentally going into the next day into a game, it makes it hard to perform. So different kind of thing we're battling, and it's changed a lot for sure, and it's an ever-changing issue.
When you hopped into pro, I mean, you mentioned the transition 16 to 16 in the WHL. Big difference, right? Big speed difference, big size difference, big strength difference. Now you have a massively successful final year of junior. And looking at the stats here, getting to 2 points a game, 128 points, 65 games, a really successful playoff run. And now you turn pro. You had NHL camps under your belt, but you hadn't played a full season. What did you notice that as being your biggest transition there that first year?
Well, I think it's the awe factor, and you and I think, when you get drafted, you go to NHL camps at 18, but when you graduate from junior, when you have your pro contract, that's when it becomes real, But it's kind of nice as a 18, 19-year-old to get to know some of the faces, so you're not in complete awe. When for me walking into a locker room and seeing a Joe Newendike or Theo Fleury or Gary Roberts, those type of people, I mean, them a little bit, and they're such great people. There's a reason why a Joe Newendike is what he is. I mean, they make you feel comfortable from day one, and you get to know him a little bit. But at the same time, I played in an era where I got to face off against Gretzky, so you're complete, in awe taking a face off. You're just trying your hardest not to make Sports Center or whatever, where he makes a fool out of you. But I think for me, coming from junior and having a good last year, we had the World Juniors there. I was playing with a lot more confidence as a player than when I came into junior as a 16-year-old. I think I had a belief that I did belong. I was able to make the Flames right out of training camp as a 20, and spent the first couple months up with a big club, and ultimately got sent down for a better part of the season. But I just think that it's certainly the best league in the world, but I felt like my confidence level was in a better place than it was entering junior hockey.
Sure. Quickly on the World Junior, I know you played 2, which is a massive feather in your cap. Did you win both of them?
We did, yeah. That was last 2 years of the round robin play. We didn't have gold medal games back then, so it was just the 7 games, and they went by a point system. So we were lucky. 2 completely different experiences. The first one was in Czech Republic. I think we were ranked 6th in the tournament. We had a lot of guys like the Chris Prongers and Paul Correa's, those type of guys were in the NHL. So we were kind of a little bit of a lunch bucket gang there, representing Canada. And I'll never forget it. Our last game, we were 5-0-1, playing the Swedes, that were 6-0, and they just needed a tie to clinch the gold. We needed an outright win, so it was ultimately like a gold medal game. And we were up by 1 with a minute left, and we took a penalty, so they were 6-on-4. They needed to tie it up to get the gold medal, and I'll never forget, it was a seam pass Kenny Johnson made through the seam to a guy who had a backdoor tap in, and Aaron Gavey was one of our penalty killers, and he just stretched out as far as he could, and the puck just tipped the end of his stick, got deflected in the corner. We went down, scored the empty netter. But you talk about being a game of inches. We were literally an inch away from a guy having a backdoor tap in to probably tie the game, and we walk away with a silver medal. So 1 gold that year, and obviously a pretty good feeling considering we weren't really ranked that high. And then the second year was in Red Deer. It was based out of there, and we had games in Calgary and Edmonton. That was the year of the NHL lockout in '95. So we had a lot of guys that had played a full year of NHL hockey under their belt, like the Alexander Daigs, the Todd Harveys, and those type of guys. And, completely opposite. We were favored. If we didn't win the gold medal, it would have been a disaster. I think it was the first year where they kind of incorporated the NHL arenas. So playing in front of, 17,000, 18,000 people in the Edmonton Coliseum or the Saddle Dome was a real cool experience. And, we were able to get the gold again. I think it was really interesting. We had the gold medal wrapped up after game 6. So we'd won the gold medal, but still had to play Sweden for a 7th game, but we had it locked up. So kind of 2 completely different experiences, but both of them were really special.
That is wild. Yeah, I remember that team. That was one of the all-time powerhouses, as far as one of the best teams ever put together there. And then I played the next year. I think that was our 4th in a row, and I think
that was in Boston, right?
Yeah, in Boston. And then I think they won 1 or 2 more after that, and then it was a little bit of a dry spell for a while. I mean, it was. I'm sure you'd have to say the same thing. I mean, as far as your career goes, that has to be one of the highlights, I'm sure, of the whole thing.
Absolutely. And I learned a lot. The first year I was, in Brandon, I was playing first line and first power play and getting all that experience, where it was kind of the first taste where I understood, hey, I'm gonna have to play a different role here. I'm not gonna be the first guy over the boards on the power play. So what can I do to help the team, right? So I ended up kind of having the role of kind of a third line penalty killer, energy guy that chipped in a little bit offensively, but was more relied on to just provide energy and be a good sound 200-foot player. So I think it was a really good learning experience for me too, just to how to buy into that role. And ultimately, when I got the chance to play, a little bit in the NHL, I kind of reflected on that experience as well.
Is that something now as a GM? And I think that's something that I help players through a lot is as the funnel tightens, and whether it's your first year, just because everyone's getting better, that, roles do change. And especially at the start, right? So maybe you're a third line role and you're not getting the special teams time. And this isn't the type of hockey you're used to playing. Some people are more readily able to adapt to that. Some people are a little more resistant. Any tricks or philosophies for you with the young players you have coming up now, and suggestions they might have?
Yeah, I think, in today's world, you have to be a good 200-foot player. I really believe that. It's you got to be. Everybody can back check. I always say everybody can play a defense. Everybody can work hard. Those are buy-in things for me. Not everybody can make that backdoor saucer pass, but everybody can do the foundation of the game and perform at a high level. And that's kind of the kids we're looking for. I think a lot of times, everybody coming into a junior program or a pro program coming from the level below, you tend to be the guy that gets a tap on the shoulder when all those important situations come about. But there's not enough ice for everybody. You got to buy your time. You got to earn it a little bit, and I think it's an excellent opportunity to round out your game to be a more complete player.
And I think the game's changing a bit in the aspect of I don't know. I guess I can't speak for your scenario, but I was leading goal scorer for the St. John's Leafs. But when I got called up, I was never in a first line role to be the goal scorer there. I was in a third or fourth line role a lot of the times and expected to go out and crash and bang. Now, NHL teams, it does seem like there's more placement, at least with some organizations. They'll bring up a third line guy for a third line role and vice versa. But I always talk to the players now about, the ability to adapt and the ability to be versatile. I mean, it's a massive skill component, because then you can be anything almost, right? And you're not a one-trick pony. So if there's any value in it, like that, it would be the value, I would say, is learn to be good at as many things as you can if you love this game as much as you say you do, because it's going to give you a longer shelf life.
Absolutely, no question about it. I think you look back on your own career, and for me, that was kind of a real turning point for myself. I think that coming out of junior, regarded as a scorer, but it's hard. You're not going to get in there and bump a Joe Nieuwendyk out of a top six role, or so you got to find ways to adapt. And for me, ended up going down to the minors for a few years, and it wasn't until I was about 25, 26 when I realized a couple things. I always felt like when I played with Calgary, in that kind of bottom six role, I just kept it safe, and I chipped the puck off the glass and just tried not to get score on, and almost be a clock killer is what I call it, right? Where you're not really doing anything bad, but you're not really bringing much to the table. And for me, kind of went through that my first few years, and wasn't working, and I got called up to Philly after a couple year stint in Europe, and I said to myself, you know what, I'm gonna play my game. I'm going to do my thing that's always given me success, and the worst thing you can do is set me down. So I just went there with another level of confidence, and tried to make plays that maybe 3 years prior in Calgary I would have chipped the puck, and it worked out. I tried to walk that line of not being a turnover machine, but play to my strengths too, right? And I think for me, looking back at that, really helped me out. I think that was the first time I probably had the opportunity to play wing, and you touched on it with the versatility, where the coach has confidence to put you in every situation. I think can only benefit a player like myself or yourself that's trying to carve their way into an NHL career, right? And for me, that was kind of the turning point that I felt, is when I learned to play another position, both left wing, right wing, and you almost become a little bit of a Swiss Army knife. And if your coach can trust you, you put out a lot of situations and find yourself getting rewarded with more opportunity.
Wow, I love that. I love everything about what you just said there. The whole idea of almost recreating your approach to the game, right? And how you're going to deliver it, and boy, is that a powerful choice, right? How are you going to show up, and what is it that you want to accomplish? Terrific stuff. I want to talk. I just want to rewind a bit, because You made the Calgary Flames in your first year pro out of camp, played however many games, 15 games or so, and then got sent down and almost kind of became a minor leaguer. Like how was the obviously euphoria coming out of camp? I would assume seeing your jersey and your name on the stall, and then like you said, a month or two later, you're not there anymore. Like talk about that demotion and how that was like for you moving down to the AHL.
Yeah, I mean, it was just part of the process, right? You often wonder, how it would have worked if, maybe I did start in the American Hockey League and kind of, got my feet wet at the pro level, and then, do I become an NHL player quicker? That's hard to say, right? But it was a different path for sure. Calgary's a situation where they had, I think, a couple guys sitting out due to contract disputes, and there's a hole for me to go in and try to make the hockey team, and had a pretty good camp, and I started off pretty well, actually. I was putting up a few points and producing a little bit, and playing with confidence, and then you know how it is, they end up signing a guy, and all of a sudden the opportunities are less and less, and for a 20-year-old it's pretty rare to not play in the American Hockey League. So I went down there, and it's a good league too. I mean, it's not an easy league, and a lot of really good players, a lot of veteran players that have been around a long time, and it's playing for keeps, right? People are playing for paychecks and to put food on the table for their families. So it was kind of an eye opener too. And you don't really know a lot about the American Hockey League before you get down there, but it's a battle, and at times could be even harder than the NHL.
Yeah, in some ways. You mentioned part of the process, you said, and you said that was, just the way it was. You are a humble, grateful guy. Anyone that knows you or talks about you, there's not a bad thing to say. But was that really the emotion going through? Like when you got sent down, like there was no resentment, there was no I think I should be there. Like were you really at peace with that decision and being in the American League?
Well, I think you're always disappointed, right? And I don't think I was bitter at anybody. I think you ask yourself, what could I have done different? And but as far as I got it. I looked at a lot of graduating players from junior hockey and where they were at. A lot of them went to the American Hockey League. So I took it as hey, this is I got to go down and prove myself. I got to try to be the best player on the ice in the American Hockey League and get that opportunity to get up again. And it wasn't easy. There was certainly some up and downs. I think I plugged away at about a point a game in the American Hockey League. But, the hard part is too, and you probably lived it too, where, those people that drafted you and maybe they move on to another organization and a new regime comes in where, they kind of look at bringing their own guys in, right? So I kind of felt like with Calgary when I was like 22, kind of lost in the shuffle a little bit where, I was a young kid, but that had played a couple years pro, where now the fresh guys were coming in, and I kind of got lost in the shuffle. And if you look at my wild, hockey DB path, I went over to Europe when I was 23 for a couple of years, just because I felt like I was kind of labeled a little bit of minor leaguer with Calgary at the time, and thought, Andy Murray was a guy that helped me move over to Europe, and I tried that for a couple of years, and had a wild career path, to say the least.
Just want to take another short break from the episode to say thank you, faithful listeners, for those who make it this far into the program, and for those who tune in every week and have subscribed. Press the subscribe button on their podcast platform of choice. I value you. The podcast values you. And for those of you who've even gone the extra mile to write a review on iTunes, if you're listening on an Apple device, it honestly only takes, well, what does it take? Less than 5 minutes, probably more like 2 minutes. To give a 5-star review and write a sentence about what it is you like about it. That helps the algorithms. That's gets it in more people's search engines automatically, and obviously that helps get the message out to more players, so it can help more players. So as you know, I do not make a dime from this podcast. This isn't about a revenue generator for me. This is about getting the message out. It is a place where I can promote my own products. But as far as this being a podcast to pay the bills, that's not what it is. It's for as many people as can possibly listen to it that will find value from it. And I need the help of you, the people who are already listening, to share it with others so they can hear the message. So thank you for being here. Thank you for staying with me. We're at episode 90. Can't wait till we get to 100 triple digits. It's going to be fun. And yeah, the future looks bright. So thanks again. And let's get back to the podcast with Marty Murray. Yeah, super. I mean, and it's crazy how much we mirror each other, to be honest. And even with what you were saying, because I was going to point out, just looking at the hockey DB, that after making the NHL, you played 4 games essentially over 2 more seasons after that, and we're a point a game guy. And I know how frustrating that can be. And I was cut from the same mold as you, in the sense that the guy who traded for me in my first year pro, Cliff Fletcher, that summer, he traded for me at the deadline. That summer, he got fired.
Yeah. So
Mike Smith came in, and I mean, I've never talked to Mike Smith, I don't think, to this day, but I don't think he liked me, right? And I think that there's definitely is a dislike among players, and I'm sure it wasn't personal, but he wanted to bring his own guys in, and you kind of get stuck. And like I said, that one year, I think I led the AHL in goals by the time I got traded, and I never got called up at 21 or 22 years old, right? So it's like you sort of start feeling like you're banging your head against a wall. And
sure.
And I felt like that as a player a little bit too. And I ended up going to Germany, played in Mannheim there, with the idea that I was going to reinvent myself and kind of come back stronger. And I mean, for me, that never happened. I just ended up signing a longer deal there and stayed. But awesome for you to come back. And that's what I was going to say. So you did leave. It wasn't like you didn't have a contract available, or maybe did you not have a contract available when your rookie deal was up?
Yeah, I think they qualified me or whatever there, so I did have a contract, and I don't know, I just kind of felt like I wasn't part of the new group's plan, and wanted to try something different, and had a good opportunity over in Europe, and being a smaller guy, I thought, well, maybe this is my path, and I went over there for 2 years. I had 2 good years. Had a wonderful time, and at 25, I think that was when the NHL went from 26 teams to 30 teams, and did some soul searching and said, I don't want to be 40 years old and say, what if, so I knew I kind of established myself in Europe a little bit, and I knew that opportunity would always be there, but I wanted to give the NHL one more crack. And, with the rules of the CBA, Calgary still owned my rights as a 25-year-old player. So I went back, primarily in the American Hockey League. We ended up having a strong team. We ended up winning the Calder Cup that year. And then, that summer I became an unrestricted free agent and signed in Philly. Probably the biggest thing that would appeal to me with Philly is you lived it too, being out in Newfoundland and Toronto. It's not the easiest trek to get to the NHL city, and I lived it in St. John, New Brunswick, when they were the farm team of the Calgary Flames. So what appealed to me in Philly was, the American Hockey League team was in the same town as the NHL team, and the practice rink was literally right down the hall. So I felt like maybe there's a better opportunity to get called up. And you talk about taking advantage of opportunities. I started out that year in Philly with I think the first 3 games with the Philadelphia Phantoms in the American League, and somebody hurt their knee, and got an opportunity, and I think I was more mature and ready for the opportunity at the time, and ended up having 3 or 4 years up in the NHL, which was obviously great.
Oh, that's almost the exact opposite of your Flames experience, right?
Pretty much.
Down and came up.
Yeah, right.
So is that well, let's talk about that Calder Cup, because this that's one thing. And then I think this also ties into the fact of whatever role you're playing, or being versatile, or being adaptable, or being a good team guy, because players who haven't won and actually haven't researched the game don't understand how valuable it is to win as a group, because these guys move on. People want winners. GMs like you, they want guys who have been there before. Whether you were the top guy in the power play, or whether you were the guy blocking shots in the PK, you become a much more valuable asset. So can you talk about that journey, and how much you think that did help you just in your professional career?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that as you get older, you understand what it takes, right? And again, there's not too many scenarios where, unless you're like a blue chip first round pick where a guy is going to start out in the American Hockey League and then all of a sudden be a superstar in the NHL, right? Like they're looking for it. And you lived it too, where there's a lot of guys that played in the American Hockey League that could probably be in the NHL, and a lot of NHL guys that could probably had been in the American Hockey League. And it's kind of being in the right place at the right time. And I always say it's somebody believing in you, right? Like I think that it was kind of interesting that I found my niche in Philadelphia because they had the reputation of the Broad Street Bullies, and that certainly wasn't my type of game. But Bobby Clarke believed in me, and there's probably other players out there that he could easily sign and give the opportunity to, and he believed in me and believed that I could help the Philadelphia Flyers and gave me that opportunity. Same with Bill Barber, who was a coach at the time, and certainly forever grateful for that. But I think it kind of lived both sides of it, right? Where you felt like, God, why am I not getting this opportunity? Why isn't this guy believing me? And then you get to a situation like I had in Philly where somebody believes in you, gives you the chance, and then ultimately it's up to the player to perform to prove that you belong.
Yeah, and there's also, it goes without saying that there has to be a maturation process on the part of the player. Like you weren't the same player in 1995 as you were in 2000. You got better. There was more experience there. But it is crazy, those stories, how you can't play. I mean, in Calgary, the guy that's coming to mind is Martin St. Louis, who couldn't play in Calgary. He wasn't good enough by Calgary's determination to play in the league. Yet he was a point-a-game guy down there for them with the St. John's Flames. But yet he lands somewhere else. Somebody believes in him. Someone gives him belief in himself, and then he becomes a Hart Trophy winner and a Hall of Famer. Like, I just love stories like that because you're right. I mean, that's the power. And I know I'm going off on a tangent now, but that's the power of a coach or even a GM who does want to invest in his people, right? Like to give them that belief, because it is such a game changer for the individual in that dressing room to know that, this guy values me, whatever the word is you want to intersect there, but it gives you a sense of purpose. It gives you a sense of place and confidence. You can become the player that, you want to become. I think there's lots of power to see that, to say that. And we see it time and time again.
Yeah, no question. It, sometimes it's right under your nose. And, I think that, whether it's your player on the management front, the grass isn't always greener, right? If you really look, there's some opportunity there within. We talked about, Kamloops Blazers and junior, our era, and, a guy like Saint, he's right there and producing, and, he's a kid that once given that opportunity and put into a situation, look out, he's a Hall of Famer now and become one of the best players to play the game. So, those are little things I draw on too as a general manager now, is like, you don't want to give up on a kid too quick, right? Like, you always look for those kids that go from 20 points their first year junior to maybe 100-point guys by the end of their junior careers, right? So you reflect on those things that you've kind of lived through as a player, and those are the success stories that you love to see.
As far as I mean, that's also why trades though sometimes are required, and that's why sometimes they're giving you life, right? Because sometimes there's just not a fit for whatever reason, right? Something doesn't work, and it could be the best of intentions on both sides, but for some reason it doesn't work, and then this player finds new life in some other organization, and all of a sudden things flourish. And I think that's a pretty cool part of our game too. And you're always looking for those diamonds in the rough. And I know there's people, organizations, NHL level for sure, that have scouts out looking all the time of like, maybe this guy could be better for us. Maybe this guy is being overlooked, in his role capacity. Absolutely. So that's pretty fun. With the Flyers, then, did you have a two-way deal then?
So yeah, my first year I signed a 1 year two-way contract, and then played 60 straight games or whatever in that year. And then I got my first one-way contract at the age of 26 for a 3-year deal. So that was a pretty special day. It makes you realize that all the work had paid off. And for me, just it felt nice to have a little security for once and have a longer term contract. And we bought our first house in Philly. And so that was kind of the first place I kind of felt like home, and was, like I said, really thankful for the opportunity the Flyers gave me, because that, to come to the rink every day and be around the Mark Recchies and the John LeClairs, the Keith Primos, the Roneks, the Montes, Desjardins, you almost had to pinch yourself. Those were some pretty heavyweight teams back then, and you know, there was a year there where I thought we had a real chance to win a Stanley Cup, which is obviously everybody's dream, and we didn't get it done. But boy, just being around that locker room and seeing how those guys handle their daily business was you know, very, very good for me, even at 26, 27 years old, to understand what it takes day in, day out to be a pro.
It's kind of interesting, and I don't think I've asked this question before, but so you were a Calgary Flame, a Philadelphia Flyer, a LA King, and a Carolina Hurricane. And being a player in those markets is a completely different experience. Like what could you compare and contrast? Maybe like where was, like, what was the biggest deal? Was it being a Flame or was it being a Flyer? I assume those two would be the higher profile spots.
Yeah, I mean, both like real great hockey markets, right? And diehard, passionate fans. I think for me, I always cherish my Flyer days. I think that was the first time where I, was able to be out for an extended period of time and play. I played for the Flyers for 2 full seasons, and so really appreciated, what the city had to offer. They're a very demanding fan base, but at the same time, if you give it all you got, they like you a lot, and that's what I tried to do every night and find my niche there. And like I said, I think that's where I really grew into a player about in regard to learning a different role, a different position, and a lot of times I get thrown up on the left wing with I remember Simon Gagne got hurt for a little bit, and I was able to play with Ronak and Amante for 14 straight games, and boy, that was fun, and able to have a little success offensively. And I knew when Gags came back that I would probably be sent back to the fourth line, but I think it was a good thing for me to prove myself that hey, if need be, I can step in there and not be Simon Gagne, but at the same time I can provide a role here and help out and chip in when I could.
Yeah, good for you. Did you get the? I guess. Well, the good thing about being in Philadelphia, like I said, is it's easy call up. But I assume you were renting there as a Phantom, and then did you ever get the shoulder tap to say, "Hey, go get a place"? Because you already had a place, right?
Yeah, exactly. So my wife and I always joke. I think we had the worst accommodations in the NHL at the time. We went to Philly and we said, you know what, let's save some money. We just built a place back in Manitoba. So we said, let's save some money this year. So we rented this little crappy 1-bedroom apartment with a futon and a TV and a bed. That's all about there was. I think we had a Rubbermaid to keep all our clothes in. So we were living kind of with the bare necessities, and then got called up and we're like, oh my God, I think we have the worst living arrangement in the NHL. So it was part of the journey. And we lived that first year. And when I signed my extension, we went on to buy a house for the first time. And I think we were there 1 year to the day and got traded to Carolina. So, it's life in pro hockey, but that was a pretty special day when we were able to sign the 3-year extension and buy a house and have a place to call our own, for sure.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Isn't it like the contrast? I mean, you don't know it unless you've ever done it. But like from being an AHLer to being an NHLer, and it's like one phone call away, or for you is like a walk across the street, essentially. Like it's so hard to describe, right? Like it's pizza on the bus to shrimp on the plane. It's like it's completely different worlds, and it's just one phone call that essentially changes your life. It's pretty remarkable, and I don't think to explain it, we wouldn't probably do it justice. But as a player, I think you become so much more grateful when you've experienced that AHL system, right? And then you get to that NHL mark, and it's like, wow, this is pretty cool.
Yeah, no question. When you get that phone call, or you're called into the coach's office in the American Hockey League and tell you you're going up top, that's a pretty good feeling. And obviously we lived in a world without the cell phones and Twitter and stuff like that. So I know we probably got on the line with our parents to share the good news, and I just remember the excitement and not being able to sleep the night before and just kind of running off adrenaline.
Yeah, for sure. Any I try to ask this question and like influences on you, either from a coach or from a player, because one of the things I try and harp on with the players that I'm working for is that we always have the ability to impact somebody else. Like, and whether you're playing U13 or whether you're a major junior guy or an NHL guy, like you have a chance to make a difference for somebody else. And generally speaking, guys who have played as long as you have, there is somebody that's touched you in some way on some team that made a difference for you. Do you remember anyone that comes to mind?
Well, I think you start back at the roots, right? And for me, it was my dad. I grew up in a small farming community in Manitoba, and the rink was open 24/7, and the dads took turns at flooding the ice with a garden hose, and so it's just the time that they put in, and my parents probably put every cent they made back into me playing hockey, and I'm forever grateful for that, and to allow me to have the opportunity to gain exposure and be the best I can be. So I obviously owe a ton to my parents and youth hockey coaches growing up. We had a real fun group of peers in my hometown where we pushed each other both in hockey and baseball, and it was a good place to grow up in. I think a lot of people out there go, God, you grew up in a town of 28 people. How could that be enjoyable? But for me, I wouldn't trade it for the world. We played hockey for 7 months during the winter, and then baseball for 4 or 5 months in the summer. I would trade it for the world. So my growing up where I grew up, was an interesting place, but certainly something I think that paved the way for me. And then, you go through your junior days, lots of people influence you. Bobby Lowe's was our coach here for 3 years. Kelly McCrimmon, who made the Brandon Wheat Kings what they are today, and somebody. Now I'm sitting in the GM chair that he had once. Somebody that I really idolize was another a guy that I can say had an influence on me, just not only as a player but as a person off the ice too. And then you look through your career as a pro, and I touched on the Philadelphia Flyers, Billy Barber. I remember him coming back at the back of the plane and saying, we're gonna find a way to keep you here, Marty. You earned your way, and I'll always remember that. And Bobby Clark, those type of people that go to bat for you, right? And those guys certainly influenced me, and just all the support I got from friends and family throughout. And it's been a great journey. And now I'm on this side of it. Hopefully I can, be one of those guys that players on the road talk about as well.
Yeah, definitely an impactful chair there, Mr. Murray. That's for sure, right? Yeah, it must be. I mean, one of the best parts of your job is sharing the good news, and I'm sure one of the worst parts is sharing the bad news too, which comes with that position. Did anyone teach you how to be a pro? And I mean that more from like a player standpoint. Sometimes we come up and we're a little green, right? Everyone's green, and you think you know what it is, and then pro hockey is just sort of a different beast. And sometimes there's that guy there that kind of points to what it could be like or what it should be like, and we take notice.
Yeah, I think one person, and it's kind of funny, it's full circle here, that really made an impact on me was James Patrick. He was a defenseman with Calgary at the time when I first broke into the league, and I was 20, and he was probably in his mid-30s and played over 1,000 games. And we went out to Calgary to train one summer. I lived with him at his house, and really, first time I kind of saw the buy-in on conditioning and eating right and things like that. And James was a guy that I kind of really, he opened up my eyes. And now full circle, he's the head coach of the Winnipeg Ice here in the Western Hockey League. So just being down the road from Brandon, we see each other a little bit. So it's nice to reconnect to him and with him. And I think there's ultimately a ton of guys along the way that certainly leave their mark on you, and I was grateful to play with a lot of great players and great people as well.
Yeah, I've heard nothing but great things about James. So he's a great coach and a good human. Josh
Absolutely.
Green, who I was roommates with in pro one year, was assistant with him last year, and couldn't say enough good things about just being with him and around him and learning from him. So I could believe that you as a player and seeing him in his playing days was the same, or you knew what was to come.
Absolutely. No question.
Well, we're in, and we haven't talked about the NAHL or the WHL, and we haven't talked about competition. So I mean, we should get this thing going. But I do want to talk about that. So you're now in the captain's chair of a WHL franchise. You have WHL roots as a player, but with marriage and with being where you were post hockey, you ended up being around the USHL and the NAHL. Talk briefly about your experience there, and then I do want to get into comparing the routes and comparing the leagues, if you will, and your experience with both of them.
Yeah, when I was retired from playing, we were living in Minot, North Dakota. My wife's from just outside of there, so just kind of figuring out the next phase of my life after playing, like a lot of us do. And this junior team from the North American Hockey League landed there, and it was the first I'd heard of the league, and got involved as assistant coach there year one, and then years 2 through 10, I was a head coach GM, and it was a great opportunity for get my feet wet and see a different side of it. We grew up in an era where it was the Western Hockey League, and to see these kids trying to pursue NCAA scholarships was certainly a different side of it for me, but certainly a side that I respect. And again, it comes back to trying to give kids an opportunity and have an impact on their career, right? So from there, I was there for 10 years in the North American Hockey League, then moved on to the USHL for 2, and really good league. I mean, the hockey in the US has certainly closed the gap a little bit in Canada, and I think that's good for the game. And there's a lot of good hockey players out there, and people ask me, well, what do you think about between the NCAA and the Western Hockey League, and there's decisions that need to be made. I think that every path is different. Obviously, playing in the Western Hockey League and now being here, I'm probably a little biased, but I think it's a scenario where you got to look yourself in the mirror and figure out what the best path for you. Maybe you're a late bloomer or whatever, and maybe the NCAA might be a better fit, or I still think for development and trying to get to the next level, the Western Hockey League's hard to compete with, but there's a lot of great opportunities, and that's a great thing for being a kid growing up in the game these days. There's great opportunities at every corner, and you figure out the right path for you.
We spoke at length about our junior experience and career, and I know it's a really warm spot for me, and it sounds like it was for you. Yet there has been times, and again, the way our careers kind of mirrored each other, where I got 29 games as a first year pro, and then that trade happened, and then the change of the GM happened, and then I was kind of forgotten about it, seemed like. And in reflecting it, I do wonder what it would have been like to do the college route and to have a little bit of a longer path, so you have a little bit longer time to develop. You played your first real NHL games at 25, right? That's a couple of years after being in college. Have you ever done that thought experiment before? If you think would you try it again and do it differently?
Yeah, I think that we've all kind of wondered about, our path and who's at the best one. But, for me, there's no question. I think my junior hockey experience was a great one here in Brandon, being close to home and just being able to, there's a passionate city and fan base here in Brandon, the Western Hockey League. So my experience was a terrific one, and that's something we'll never know, right? And as far as hey, it was if I went and played college hockey, would that have been different? But my experience with the Western Hockey League was a great one, and something I wouldn't change for the world.
Yeah, no, I agree. As far as, okay, I'm going to put you on the spot here with this one. Who wins like the majority of the games? If the East Division of WHL went and played in the USHL, is the league better? Do you think? Is there stronger players overall, or how would you rank it?
It's a real tough one. I think it's a different brand of hockey. I think that the US kind of college model is just 100-mile-an-hour. People in your face, where there's maybe more plays being made at the Western Hockey League level. So that's a tough one. And I the best example I can give you was during COVID, we brought Cole Sillinger from Medicine Hat down to Sioux Falls, where I was, and he came off his 16-year-old year in the Hat, where he had, I think, a point a game, and then he came back to the USHL with us, and we got him after Christmas, and I think he had a point and a half a game. So we had him, and a name you're probably familiar with in Spokane, Luke Toporowski came as well. So we had both of those guys who were really good players at the WHL level come and join us at the USHL level, and they respected it. They said good things about it, and it is a little bit of a different brand of hockey, but both really good leagues. That's a tough question. Obviously, being back in the Western Hockey League, I'm a little biased right now. But like I say, a lot of really good players out there, and it's a good time to be a hockey player because there's a lot of options.
Yeah, oh, and I mean back to the start of our conversation, you talked about competition, and I know like that's so me. I'm around BCHL, right? Like one of the biggest junior A feeders to the collegiate system in Canada. Well, not the one of it is the biggest to the U.S. system, and there's also the WHL here, so I can see both. Both leagues, and I mean it's no secret that the WHL is a better league, right? Overall,
Mm-hmm.
it's just
Mm-hmm.
deeper, it's a little more talented, but the junior A model is like it's a fantastic product. I think it's really solid. It's a really solid league. The question is like when you're playing in that league, what does that guy look like in the WHL? And I'm sure you do that. You have to do that as a scout and as an evaluator, right? What does this guy look like at the not only in this level, but if he's in a different league? How do you I guess play that game as a GM? I guess you're not really looking at junior players. You're looking more down in the developmental leagues, more like midget or bantam for the bantam draft. But how do you compare
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, no, you said it best. We're probably looking at kids a little younger. I think that we probably have one kid on our roster right now that was come out of like a junior A league. He came out of Saskatchewan. So most of those kids we identify at the Western Hockey League level when they're bantams. Right now we're watching 08 kids, which is a whole new world for me. They're just little boys yet, but that's what we're watching. And it's a whole new world for me, because especially coming from the North American League where it's a lot of 19, 20-year-olds, and then you're back to watching bantam players. It's kind of funny, but you're just in awe on how good these kids are. They're obviously probably training on the ice a lot and have their skills coaches, so they can do some pretty special things, and it's fun just being involved in that and identifying players that will hopefully ultimately help the Brandon Wheat Kings someday.
With that system and with the whole scouting process, one, I want to ask you a quick question about the WHL draft and the age. But first, about where you are actually looking or have your scouts look. It seems out here out west, at least the CSSHL is the most widely scouted league, I believe, because of that word you said, competition. I think there's probably the deepest amount of competition there. For me, it hurts a little bit because it's taking away from the AAA product, and people are leaving home quicker, and parents are having to spend more money, and it makes the game more expensive, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that is essentially where people are watching out here in the West. In the East, I believe it's a bit different. Like there's a little stronger minor hockey model in Saskatchewan, I think. But where are you guys watching out there?
Yeah, all over the place. We Chris Moulton's based out of Fernie, BC. He's my right-hand man here and has been a godsend to me as far as learning the ropes here and having the experience. He was a GM in Spokane, actually, or assistant GM in Spokane before he came and joined the Wheat Kings. So he's located in Fernie. We have, scouts in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and we're looking everywhere. And obviously, I think the academies and such get a lot of the attention, but there's still those kids that that are playing AAA midget in Saskatchewan or Manitoba or what have you that turn out to be really good players. And we talked about it earlier with the geekies. It's you don't have to move away and go spend a lot of money to have your kids get that exposure. I think there's opportunities, and everybody has enough representation in their organization that if they're good enough, they'll find you.
And this might be completely wrong, but is Hudson Kibblewhite one of your draft picks?
Who's that? Sorry,
Hudson Kibblewhite?
No, we don't have him.
Okay, I thought he was out.
I'm so on our list, but
yeah, he was a Vernon product that played for Rink last year. At the level, and I thought that he got drafted by someone. Well, he did get drafted by someone out east, but I guess it wasn't you guys. What do you think about the 15-year-old draft? I thought with COVID switching last year and like having to have the 2 drafts in 1 year, which I'm sure you're super thankful you didn't have to participate in because one is hard enough. But it just seemed like, why not join the Q? Why not join the O and shift it to a first-year midget draft? You get an extra year. It allows families some time to breathe, 1 more year to breathe. Allows you guys 1 more year to allow these kids to mature, right? It's a little easier to speculate what type of player they're going to be at the 16, 17-year-old level. But that's my bias. Do you think it's good to have the Bantam draft, or would you rather see it as a midget draft?
I think that, it's hard, when you're identifying 15-year-olds, sometimes that it's hard, right? Like sometimes the kids are as big as they're going to be at 13 or 14 or 15, and they don't grow again, right? And there's times where we have a kid in our team this year, Roger McQueen, we drafted at he's 5'7", and right now he's 6'5" as a 16-year-old, and I think we hit the lottery there, so he's going to be a really good one. So it can, there's a lot of different ways it can go, right? But I think in the world that we're living in, where there's that competition, for the bantam draft, it makes sense to try to get on those high profile kids as quickly as we can and get them under our umbrella and ultimately be real good players for us down the road. So I know, just talking with our group, with the 2 drafts back to back there because of COVID was an absolute nightmare, because not only is there 2 drafts, a lot of times you couldn't get out to the rink to watch them with their own eyes, right? So I know it was a very stressful time for our scouting staff, and like you said, I'm probably fortunate I wasn't around for that. It would have been a tough one for sure.
It'd be easy to do do an autopsy on those 2 drafts in the coming years, just to see like if there were any like more or less successful or whatever. Because I would have just assumed that there would be more mistakes, because you can't see everybody, right? And you don't get many eyes on them and stuff. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, we're lucky we live in the world we do with having video being accessible, but at the same time, there's nothing like seeing kids live with your own eyes, right? So I'm sure everybody tried to get through it as best they could, but it certainly wasn't an ideal situation, but got through it. And I know we're happy with our guys, and excited about, like I said, I'm surrounded by a lot of good people here. We have a good foundation in place, and looking forward to continuing to grow that.
With you in the GM chair, just from a scouting standpoint, when I've Kenny Holland I've had a couple of guys at the higher levels too. Like, they want to have eyes on the first couple picks themselves, and then they seem like they'll hand off that responsibility to their scouting staff for different picks. Do you like to get out in the rinks yourself and watch these guys? Is that something that you want to do?
Yeah, I've been out to quite a few games in the Manitoba area right now, and obviously it's just a part of where we draw from. But I think it's important to get to know the players that we could potentially be drafting. And I think I'm relatively new with the organization and the scouting staff here, but everybody's on the same page, I think, as far as the type of player we want here representing our hockey team, and have a lot of experience under our belt. My assistant coach from my Brandon days is one of our head scouts here, and somebody I can lean on that's in the office almost daily. And so, like I said, I walked into a situation where it's running in the right direction, and hopefully we can continue to do that here as we move forward.
Awesome. That's one last question, because I know there's a lot of parents out there, and it's an epidemic, I think, and it was probably even an epidemic when we were playing. But it's like this: the exposure with the goals and the assists and the production, that everyone is so point hungry, and they feel that they have to be the leading scorer on the team to get recognized. I understand talent and production is part of the game. It always has been. It always will be. Usually, high profile players are putting up big points. Is that the end all and be all for the Brandon Wheat Kings, or are you trying to identify players that can obviously grow within